Today is February 10th, 2022. I am Gabrielle Fellows with the Museums of Lake County, and this is an oral history interview with Patricia Treppa. Patricia, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Can you spell your name?
Treppa?
Yes.
Treppa.
And what can you tell us about your name? Were you named after anyone?
No, that's my husband's name. My name was Patricia Ann Skellinger.
And is there any history about your maiden name?
Well, Skellinger, I was born in San Jose, California. And my father and mother came from Nebraska. And my father was a master plumber and had his own shop. And we moved. He sold his business when he was 36, and we moved to Lake County to Bachelor Valley, Winter Springs, to a 2,500-acre ranch. And that was in 1950. And I'm the oldest, and my sister is a year and 20 days younger than I am, Billy. And then I have two brothers, Bill and Frank, that are 7 and 8 years younger than I am.
What is your date of birth and how old are you?
May 9th, 1938, and I'm 83.
And what were your parents' names?
My mother was Lois Swally, and my father was William Skellinger. And then my mother married and became Lois Skellinger.
And you have a couple of siblings?
3.
And what are their names?
My sister is Billy Wood. My 2 brothers are Bill and Frank Skellinger.
And where did your ancestors come from?
My mother's ancestors came from, I have Dutch and German and Scandinavian on my mother's side, and her grandmother was a Shriner, and her mother was a Swally, and then she became a Skellinger.
Oh. Where were you raised?
I was raised, I didn't get to tell you about my father. He was born in, my mother was born in 1915, and my father was born in 1912. And my father was, his mother was a Roddy, and then her mother was a Carson, and then his mother was Annie Skellinger, because she married a Skellinger.
And were you raised in Upper Lake?
No, I was raised in San Jose, and then we went to Palo Alto, where my father started his business.
Okay.
So I went the first 12, I turned 12 just the day before we moved up here to Lake County.
What was San Jose like back then?
Well, I was just 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
So I really remember Palo Alto, Stanford University, and everything it had to offer. And then my father built us a home, and Primrose Way in Palo Alto. And then the one thing I remember about that, I probably was 2 or 3, is the war. The men used to go out in the streets at night and walk up and down the streets, and the wives covered all the windows in the house and preparing for somebody to fly over, and that would have been about 1941 or 40.
And which war was that?
World War II.
Okay.
And it was kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And So then we lived in our Primrose Way house, and then my father built a home a few blocks away on Clark Avenue. And then he built 2 houses side by side and sold them. And I started school in Palo Alto. And
So what age were you when you got to Lake County?
12,
And what grade were you in?
7th. I went into 7th grade.
Did you have a favorite teacher in 7th grade?
Yes, Mr. Jones, he read us a lot of Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh.
It got you really enthused.
So what did your dad do for a living?
Well, he was a plumber, master plumber, and he and my husband's father were both exempted from the war for their talents, their education, or their what they did. My father did boilers, and Point Montera out is a Navy base, and then Moss Landing was a Navy base, and they kept him from the war to use him in these places. And then they built Dibble Hospital, a veterans hospital in Palo Alto, and he was under there and designed all that.
So he was a plumber, and he knew how to build houses too?
And houses too, yeah.
Did he build other people's houses or just your own?
No, only for us and 2 that he sold.
Oh, okay. What do you know about how your parents met?
They just met in Nebraska City. My mother had 3 brothers, and she was the only girl, and my father had 4 sisters, and he was the only boy. They did not, they're both spoiled in their own ways.
Oh.
Yeah. And they met between the brothers and the sisters, all knew each other, although I think they lived in a different town. And then they got married and came to California. My father had relatives in California already. 3 of his sisters were here, and they were married. And when he first came, he went to Lemoore in down the middle of California, and for school, and graduated with some background in plumbing or something, and then he went to work. And my mother, she went to school in Nebraska before she came to California when she got married. They got married in Nebraska.
What did your mother do for a living?
My mother worked she was a housewife and a mother of 4.
Oh, okay.
And then lived on that big ranch and had to feed all the workers at wheat time, and everybody would come and you had to feed them, and kept the house. And we had a lot of company come up from the Bay Area. And
a lot of company.
Yes, a lot of company, relatives and people that had worked for my father.
How many people worked for him?
I think it was another company. It was called Alsbury, Slack, and Skellinger. And it was a plumbing business, and sheet metal, heating, and plumbing. And that's their business. It was business in Palo Alto, and it was right over the University Avenue by the Redwood School.
Does the business still exist?
I don't know, because see, my father passed away. He was born in 12, and I think the other men were about his age. But yeah, it just I don't know if their sons went in to work on those or take over, or I don't know.
Tell me about your father's ranch. Where was it again?
In Bachelor Valley, right out here, 5 miles outside of Upper Lake, and it's called, and Winter Springs. It was called the Winter Springs Ranch, and it was 2,500 acres, excuse me, and it ran between Bachelor Valley and Potter Valley, all the way. The end of the ranch was close to Potter Valley back there.
Did you guys grow crops on the ranch?
Yes. Well, my father was a rancher, so he had beautiful Hereford cows and bulls. We had a couple beautiful bulls. And he had hogs and sheep, a lot of sheep. And he was an improver. My father was always an improver. And he put a dam in. He put 2 dams in, and he put a reservoir in, and he built a cabin up 7 miles in the mountains for people to go hunting to. There were a lot of hunters, great hunters.
What kind of stuff did they hunt?
Deer.
Oh.
We're deer hunters. So anyway, that house that we moved into was 100 years old, and it was a stagecoach stop on the way to Ukiah.
Oh.
And there's pictures of it in the book that were removed there. And then
What book?
right over here, I'll show you one of the books by Patrick.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And there's a picture of it, and I didn't even realize, but it was a stage stop. And it was 100 years old when we moved into it. We had 2 bedrooms upstairs and a porch where you could pass food out to the farmers, the ranchers that worked for you, and a kitchen. And my mother had all the appliances. My father always gave her good appliances. So, and it had a big living room and a big fireplace and a big dining room.
How did he find the house?
He used to hunt up at Hopland, and through a realtor, and he decided to retire. And he had it all. He found everything, and we drove up here to it and looked at it one day. And then all of a sudden we were moving here in May of 1950.
And do you know any history about the house?
Oh, it belonged to the big ranch, 2,500 acres, that ran all the way to Potter Valley. And it was in Bachelor Valley, which was named after some bachelors that had lived there, the O'Connors. And it was called Winter Springs Ranch. And above it was the Winter Springs Hotel that was over 100 rooms that had burnt down in 1906. It was beautiful and brick and everything, and nobody ever got to go into it. Burned down for some reason. And that was above us about a mile on the road. And then they had a lot of homesteads on it, where people up in the acreage through the years had planted apples and some fruit trees and had a little cow or something. They had made little homesteads coming from other states. And that became the whole ranch.
What are some of your earliest childhood memories? Can you tell us a couple of stories from childhood?
The one is the war. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going out to Point Montero, the Navy base, at Thanksgiving and Christmas. They would send us home with turkeys and goodies for the kids. And I did through the years, I picked up acquaintances that I knew something about. I don't know how to say that. When I came to Lake County and I went to work, one of the people that was on the Dibble Hospital in Palo Alto was my father, knew my father. He became my boss up here.
Oh.
So I had, connections. For some reason, I ran into connections of things like that.
Where was he your boss? What job?
I'll tell you later. That was 1964, and the Lakeport's 69, and it was the Lakeport Skilled Nursing Center. When I went over there, that was Mr. Bullard, Clarence Bullard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a best friend as a kid?
Yeah, I had a girlfriend named Martha, and she was over on one side of University Avenue, and I was on the other side, and I used to ride my bike over to visit her.
What did you have in common?
I don't really know. We were young. Bicycle riding, really. That's what we liked, and we were in the same class.
Does she still live in Lake County?
That was down in Palo Alto.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't have any idea.
Where did you go to high school?
Upper Lake.
Did you have any favorite subjects?
More or less, I liked the history and the English and social services.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
I had Mrs. Lee. She was an excellent teacher.
Were you involved in any after-school activities?
Yes, I was volleyball captain for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And we won everything.
Cool. Did you have any goals or dreams for when you grew up?
I don't. I just think I was going along that I was going to go to college. I was headed for the University of Santa Cruz. And then when I graduated, my father didn't care for who I had picked out for my boyfriend. So I left the couple days after I graduated. I left for San Francisco, got myself a job, found an apartment in a rooming house, and came back on the Greyhound and told my parents I was going. And so they took me down with some of my clothes, and that was it. I went to San Francisco and worked for a year and a half till we got married. And my husband was from San Francisco. He's Indian. And I say Indian instead of Native American because to me, when we were with them, and all these years I was with them, they said Indian and I said Indian. And he had been raised in San Francisco because his father, like I said before, was released from the service and had a special thing because he ran equipment on the coast and made little airports. Over Mendocino, Moss Landing too, down on the other side of Half Moon Bay. Small airports because they were expecting the Japanese to come over from the war. And so that was his expertise. And then my husband went in, they lived in North Beach then. They were down at Moss Landing, the last place, and then at about 42, I think, 43, they moved to San Francisco, and they lived in the North District, and he went to school at Galileo and the Marina, and
What was your husband's name?
Donald Treppa.
And how did you meet him?
I went to school with all his relatives in Upper Lake at high school. And one relative, my classmate, was Donald's uncle, but he was younger than Donald, but he was still Donald's uncle. And he kept saying to me, why don't you write to Don? Why don't you write to my nephew? Why don't you, do this? And I said, I don't even know him. Why would I write to him and stuff? And then, but I had been going to school with all his cousins, the Ikeys and Abasolos, and there was a whole group, and I just knew them all. They were in classes, and one of the boys was in my sister's class. And somehow they were all related when I started investigating history. And another one was Delmar Asbill, and then he had a brother and a sister. Yeah, they were all included in our school. They were just included. I never knew about the way they were treated, or the ostracizing, or being looked down upon. They were just us, right? It was us, all of us. And they were great athletes, very good athletes. And so anyway, Donald, I went to work at the Bank of Upper Lake when I was 15. I was chosen to go. And so then they taught me. That's how I learned my banking. That's how I got the job in San Francisco when I went down there. I had some experience. And the funny thing is, Donald's aunt, many years older than I had, she had been picked out to do the same thing. She had gone to the Bank of Upper Lake and had that job when she was very young in high school.
Oh.
Yeah, so, and then Donald was in Korea for 1953, 54, and he came home in 55. And that's when I met him. That was my senior year. Well, it was my junior year, and then it went into my senior year, because I graduated in 1956.
So you met in high school?
Yeah. And so, yeah, and he was home from the service. And he put some money in the bank. And I watched it just dribble away. He didn't have good sense about it. and we met downtown by the post office one day, and that we just clicked. And so then his uncle brought him around, and his cousins, and we went to a couple dances and ball games. We went to a lot of ball games because his uncle was on the teams at that time in high school. So.
How old were you when you got married?
18, I think.
Wow.
I was still 18, yeah. We got married February 9th, 1957. And I turned 19 on May 9th. So.
Do you remember your wedding day?
Yes, but we, because we were not quite approved of, we just got married in San Francisco all by ourselves. And had an apartment. I was already down there with an apartment. And Donald came down at New Year's, and he came down quite often once in a while, and I'd come home every weekend on the Greyhound. And one, I think it was Christmas or more like New Year's, my roommate got us, had a party in our apartment, and so we were supposed to leave. And so Donald and I walked the streets of San Francisco all the way out to the avenues and all the way back. We were living on Pine Street, and we walked all the way back, and close to where we were living on Bush, we found an apartment for rent. And he did not have a job. I had the job. We had no money to give her down, but I was going to get my income tax and my check. And we talked to her, and she said, sure, go ahead.
Wow.
And rented us the apartment.
Cool.
I know, it was really nice. And then a couple of times that has happened to us, and people have been very nice. And over by our apartment was a little grocery store, and we were on Bush, and there was a little grocery store, and we went in, and I had been going there for a couple of months, 3, 4, 5 months, and said, you know, we don't have any money right now. I have my job, and you know me. And I said, can we get a few groceries? And guy said, he was Asian. He said, sure, go ahead. So we got some groceries. And when I got paid, I went and paid him. And when I got paid, we got paid. Then Donald went to work for, and he got a job right away. He had been a truck driver before he went to the Army, and for General Motors in San Francisco. And then he went, and I don't know how they were affiliated with the Carpenters Union, but the Carpenters Union sent him, when he went to look for a job, over to Sausalito to a shoemaker's, and they built beautiful, fancy fiberglass yachts, and they hired him. And so he had to start learning all the formulas for making fiberglass, and had to learn all that stuff. And then he moved up to a supervisor, and he was there 9 years. And he brought his uncle down, and his uncle-in-law down, and 3 kids from my high school down to work for him, and then helped them get along to other things. 2 of them went to the state of California for the road work, and he had also taught some how to run equipment, and that's what they wanted to do.
How did your family and friends feel about your marriage?
They were not happy with it. They just didn't, because I had picked another, I guess, nationality. My father was old-time German. Very young man, very good looking, but he still had old-time German thoughts. He was a stinkpot. And he and Donald became the best of friends, even better than my 2 brothers with my father. They just clicked. And Donald, when we moved back to Lake County, worked for my father several times. Donald became a backhoe expert, And he was known for the best backhoe in the county. He had a lot of credit there.
Wow.
And so that they drove down. We got married in February, and the doorbell rang in our apartment in May. And we said, well, we don't know anybody who'd in the morning, on Sunday morning, who would be coming down to talk to us. And so I didn't answer right away, and we were 7 floors up. And I looked down, and it was my parents. They had come down to see us. And so I was so flabbergasted and so thrilled. They wanted to take us to Fisherman's Wharf. That's what I meant before, North Beach. That's where Donald was raised, North Beach.
Okay.
And they wanted to take us to Fisherman's Wharf. Well, I was so proud of myself. I had a chicken baking in the oven and stuff. So we turned them down and forgot to even ask them if they'd like to eat with us. I was going, oh my God. So, and then when he was in Sausalito, the yachts were racing yachts, and wealthy people bought them. They were very beautiful, and quite a few celebrities bought them. Ingrid Bergman's daughter bought one, and several others, and they took them out on the bay. And he was asked to sail with a couple of them to Hawaii, which was, 17 days over, I think they expected, or more, and then fly back. Because we're raising our family, we didn't have the money to do that, for him to leave work and stuff. So we decided not to go.
So what tribe was Donald a part of?
Upper Lake Como.
And what do you know about their tribal property in Upper Lake?
Well, I was involved from the time I was 18 years old. We would come up and go to the meetings with his parents. So I was involved in all of that all the way through. And the property, we had 234 acres or something. And then they had little allotments. And they built on them. The grandfather, his great grandfather, Arthur Treppa, was the one that started all of Upper Lake.
Oh.
And in 1936, he went to the BIA and asked if they would help get property. He lived at the old Robison. The old Robison is before you head into Upper Lake. And they lived at the old Robison, and he had built a big home there for his family. There was 9 children, one didn't make it. And so the BIA came over, and they purchased land. And this is all the history that I got into that I have. Arthur went to the BIA again. He had workers. He was a great farmer and rancher. And he had Indians working for him. And he asked the BIA, he said, we need some houses to house these people. You know, I'm keeping them, they're working, they have money, they're supporting them, but we need some houses to put on, fix them up in, or we're going to, lose our workers. And he was written up by the BIA as one of the best agriculture farmers that they knew of, and that he could have taught the white people. That was right in their papers. And he was very good at that. And so they built 8 little houses. And then the workers by that time had kind of filtered out, so he put a couple workers in the house. And then his wife, Teresa, Teresa Card, she had quite a few relatives, and my mother-in-law, excuse me, was her cousin. It's so mixed up, I'm getting you all mixed up from one thing to the other. And she married my father-in-law, Frank Treppa. He was the oldest boy of Arthur Treppa's.
Oh, okay.
And that was my mother-in-law. That was the cousin to Arthur's wife, Teresa. But Arthur had been married before to Lena Davis Bucknell. And she passed away after childbirth. So Arthur remarried. And so Frank, the father-in-law, was raised more by his grandmother, Clara Davis, who does a lot of the, Lena and Clara did a lot of the basket work. My classmate, the uncle, I had him over here last year, and we tried to get some information out of him because he was the last elder in the group, and he's still alive.
How old is he?
He's a year older than I am.
Okay.
And, well, let's go back to the houses.
Okay.
And so the houses were taken up mostly by Teresa Card's relatives. And Grandpa Frank told me about this, that they had runners in those days because they didn't have telephones or anything. And the runners would run from Upper Lake to Covelo and Upper Lake to Ukiah, the 2 reservations over there, and the Covelo, the reservation up there. And he met Don's mother up there and brought her back to live in one of those houses.
Oh.
Yeah. And then her cousin was next door, because she was a cousin too. So a whole bunch of women cousins from Covelo came down and settled that little reservation there. And one person he put there was he wasn't Indian. He was Mike Gomez, but he was such a good welder and worker, they kept him to take care of the equipment. And then Grandpa Arthur, he started the tribe with some milk cows and some grain, and what else did he plant? And wheat and something else. But like with the milk cows, and they had a barn from a neighbor up there. There's a cheese factory up there, and there was a barn they built on the side. And but he made a schedule. They were supposed to go milk twice a day, and and that didn't work out.
Oh.
You know, one didn't show up, or one didn't show up, and so that it didn't. He was very outgoing and very talking to the BIA all the time, and he went to Washington, D.C. to see Earl Warren when he was put on for the Supreme Court.
Oh.
Yeah, Arthur was there. And my father opened up my father met Arthur was a well digger, and an improver too. And my dad decided on the ranch to put a new well down because we were irrigating all our acres. And so he put irrigation in everywhere. So he sunk another well. And so Arthur was the one, and Frank, his son, who came to put that well down. So my dad met him and did business with him. Well, years later, not too many, 5 or 6 years later, is when my dad opened the paper and he said, "I'll be darned. There's Frank Treppa at the White House meeting." Earl Warren. He couldn't believe it. So, yeah. So, they started their reservation, and Hardesty was already there.
When did they start the reservation?
1936.
And was there anything in the area at the time on the property?
No, just there. No, and Upper Lake was there. They're just a mile from Upper Lake.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were like 5 miles from Upper Lake. And you could walk, really, if you wanted to, from Upper Lake over to the reservation. We never did that. I took my horses, but we never did that. And there was another reservation. They put them both together. Now they're called Habitable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they put them together. And the other one was, they built a bridge. And that one was called Hardesty, and this one was called Dual Rancherias. And
but together they're called Habitable?
Habitable now. Yeah, it was Upper Lake Rancheria, and now they went back to a very old name that they had in their books.
How many tribal members do they have?
I think we have under 200.
And you were saying that you know the last remaining elder?
Well, it was Louis Treppa. My husband was the last remaining elder. And he knew, and they always treated him with special things and at the tribe meetings and stuff. And now his uncle is the last oldest elder. There might be some on the other side. I don't know. But when we did our DNAs, it was Louis Treppa and Donald Treppa that had the DNA to go back to Frank Treppa and to Arthur Treppa for who was on that side of who we took in. Frank Treppa, that was Donald's father. He was belonged to the first wife that Arthur Treppa had. Arthur Treppa was the grandfather, and he started the reservation. And Arthur Treppa's first wife passed away. And Arthur remarried. And he remarried to Teresa Card. And when he remarried, Frank went to Nice to live with Hillcrest Ranch, where his grandma was. She was there and she helped raise him. Well, Frank Treppa, Donald's father, was the first little Indian boy that when he was 6, that wanted to go to school, and Upper Lake would not accept him. And the Adventist school over here between Upper Lake and Lakeport, they accepted him. And he started school there. And then the government made, I don't have those, I should have those dates or somewhere, but it's hard to find. The government forced the schools to take the Indian kids. And so then they built a separate little building for the Indians kids. They still would not put them in with the regular children that were studying. And then the government came through and made a real thing, and Upper Lake and all the tribes up here got to go to school, to the real schools. And he was the first little Indian boy that they were made to take into school.
Who were Mr. and Mrs. Dool?
Mr. and Mrs. Dool came from Ohio. They met up with a man in 1840-something, and his name was Elliott, William Elliott. And Mr. Elliott was having a wagon train come out to California. They were going to Sonoma. And Mr. and Mrs. Dool met him and hooked up with the wagon train, and they came out to California, and they went to Sonoma County. Well, at the time in Sonoma County, General Vallejo was just coming down there claiming some of his land, and they had fighting. And Mrs. Dool and Mrs. Elliott cut and pulled pieces of flannel, and Mrs. Dool designed it and made the first bear flag for the state of California. And then they used it there when Vallejo was fighting and causing all the trouble, claiming his land, that he said. And then afterwards, they moved to Upper Lake. And Upper Lake, they, well then, that's a long stretch, so they moved to Upper Lake, and as you come around the Forest Service in Upper Lake on Middle Creek Road, and you went up just a little bit toward Upper Lake, they had a big giant house there. And they sold property to the BIA for the reservation, our reservation. And that road, it was called Dool Road after the Dools. And the whole rancheria on that side, the rancheria was two different sides, and it was named Dool Rancheria. And that's how it got its name. And then they passed away, and the daughter was alive, and she sold it to the BIA.
Mm-hmm. Were there any challenges when the tribe was federally recognized?
Well, the tribe was terminated in 1958. I was at the meetings, and the people came over from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and everything, and terminated the Indians as a tribe. Now, before that, they were supposed to take care of the Indians. Hospitals, medicals, and stuff. They never did nothing for those people. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And they terminated them from all services. Well, when they did that, some of Donald's cousins, they went on to, when we got it back, because they were going to college. And quite a few of them graduated from Berkeley. And they're still here, and they're my neighbors down there. And BIA took all the help for schooling and just everything. They just terminated. Well, then 7 or 9 years later, there was a big lawsuit. And I have the papers and stuff on the lawsuit. And one name, Mrs. Duncan, she sued, and she got everybody together to give back their rights. So they finally got him back, and it went to court, and the judge made a ruling. And what year was that? When our tribe got recognized, they made us into a association. That's how they handled it. So they made us into an association, and that was the Hardesty and us. So they went around and did a inventory on who lived where and what. And there was 27 holders of the property. They either owned it or allotted it or had it in trust. 27 people had been there. Mm-hmm. So they counted those 27, and that was our lineal descendants. And that's how we decided who was in our tribe.
Oh, okay.
You had to be a lineal, not the blood, but you had to be lineal descendants of someone that was on that paper. And it was passed on the BIA and the judges and everything. Well, my 2 daughters were born then, and so they're listed, Donald and my 2 brothers, my 2 children, my girls. And his 2 girls came right after my girls, but his weren't listed on there. They didn't list any white people. You got nothing.
What? Why? How come?
If you were an Indian, Indian was Indian, and they didn't, recognize. And in those days, they didn't recognize women at all. And the funny thing was that Arthur Treppa, he had 5 daughters and 3 sons. And when they got the property back, the allotments and stuff, he made sure each one of his daughters was the head of the household. Because, and it's in the history books over there in Sacramento too, all 4 of the daughters married Filipinos. Mm. And they put it right in the books, 4 of Arthur Treppa, in the pages and everything. So he didn't want to give the land to their husbands. So he gave the land to each one of his daughters and put their names on it in the books. And that's when women started getting to do things, just like women in the outside world got to do things and run their own places. And then they gave people a choice. Do you want to go back and be under the BIA and be trust land? Or do you want to stay out and pay your own taxes? Well, my husband led a group, and almost all of his relatives, we all stayed out. We didn't go back to the BIA. We were out, and we were staying out. And then we developed a group of us and the other people on Hardesty side, some chose to stay out with us, and some chose to stay in. And we made a program up where each person had to pay their taxes on their own property. The county gave each person that stayed out their own little tax thing. But on our acreage, our 200 acres, and our cemetery, the acreage, a wood lot, a picnic area and the water system. I think that's all, because we handled it. We all got together, and every year Charlene would send out a notice and divided up the amount that was owed. So we kept all our own things out from the BIA and from the county. And it worked out great, except later on, of course, some people stopped paying.
Oh.
Yeah, or some people were taking all the, well, it's all Indian heritage is what they do. They're very hard to work with in some ways. I don't want to say that, not bad, but they like things given to them, and like the woodlot. Whoever got in the woodlot first sold the most of the wood out of the woodlot. Things like that would happen. Yeah, so, but, and then,
What has the tribal historian taught you?
what is the what?
The tribal historian. What have they taught you?
They haven't taught me nothing. I'm teaching them.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, when Donald died, well, I've always been the historian. For some reason, I just loved it. And then Donald was sick for 18 years. And his parents passed on all of the things to me and told me stories and told my kids stories, and some of the old histories and the feelings, the beliefs, and things like that. And I was there, I don't know why. I just kept my ears open, I guess. And I was going through the whole thing with my husband and coming back. We came back and forth up here for 9 years from Sausalito. We moved to Sausalito from San Francisco. Then we moved to Mill Valley, and Donald still had the same job at Sausalito. But we came back, whenever they had a meeting, we came back up. Because both our parents were here, and, we got to see our parents and what was going on. And we came up to all the meetings, and I went to all of them. And so I was involved with, and I just kind of kept my ears open, I guess. And then I kept collecting papers. And Grandma and Grandpa wanted to tell me stories and tape me. That was Frank and Elvira, Donald's parents. And run, but with 3 kids and working, I just never got to do it.
Right.
So I'm teaching the historian up there.
Who is the historian?
Kai Granada. He's new to the tribe, but he was born here. Then he went away for many years and he came back. And he's doing the historical writings and copying. And through the years, a lot of them have taken that job. And through the years, I've given them all my papers and have never got anything back. Oh. I gave everyone that took the job my papers. I told them everything and explained in the water system. Donald and I did the water system, and when he got hurt, then we still did the water system. We would drive up there. My son would drive us up there. You had to read the meters once a month. And my son would drive us up there, and then we'd get out. I would get out, and then we got another gal that helped us, Pam Kipsel, and she was always with agriculture. And so she and I would read the meters. And there was just 30, I think. 30 meters. And then we'd bill them because we had to pay the electricity to the PG&E. And so we would go on, and then Donald, before he got ill, he had a computer right here, and he would send them out a bill. But sometimes it was very hard to collect. And then some people would, if the pump turned off or something, like Jeanette Holder and Covita Miller, they always called Donald, and they would go over and flip the things. Or Covita, many, she just passed away a couple of weeks ago, many times would pay the PG&E because somebody else hadn't paid. And so then when we collected the money, we'd give her the money back.
Right.
But they were good, good about doing it. Jeanette Holder and her were very good about that. When the BIA terminated us in 1958, and they took all services away from the tribes. And then there was a lawsuit in 1977, I think, and it's called the Andrus lawsuit. And Andrus was the judge, and he gave the tribes back their permission to keep their land out of the BIA or put it back into the BIA. And the tribe decided they had been paying taxes to the county all those years, 10 years, and were living, on their land. It had been allotments originally. With the BIA, they all applied for allotments of land. And then my husband and a group of them, all the relatives, decided to keep it out and not go back to the BIA. And I discovered that the other day that they made that decision in 1946. Frank Treppa, Elvira Treppa, and Arthur Treppa went to Sacramento and talked about the termination of the Indians. And it took them from 1946 to 1958 to finally get all that in the works. And then we had the choice in 79, I think it was, of going back into the BIA. Well, the BIA never did anything for us anyway. For the tribes and stuff, they were supposed to help the kids go to school and medical health and a lot of things that they just never came through with. And so they decided not to go back into the BIA. So we kept our property out. Everybody kept their own allotment out. There was 27 lineal descendants made right there. There was 27 people living on the reservation. And the BIA came through and got everybody's name, and only the heads of the household were the names. And Arthur Treppa had, when he had that chance, he made sure he had 5 daughters. All 5 daughters became heads of the household because they had married Filipino men. And so at that time, women were not heads of the household. And they didn't like women to be the head of the household. And so they kept their land out. All 27 members voted on that. And then the VIA set them up in an association, is what they called them. Not a tribe, but an association. Upper Lake Como Association. And the 27, we had a treasurer, Charlene Munoz. Her mother was Verna Ike, and she every year sent out the taxes and what everybody's share were, because we had a woodlot up Middle Creek Road. We had the 234 acres in the background of the reservation, and we had the water system and the cemetery and a picnic area. And so we kept all those taxes. We kept, the 27 of us kept paying the taxes on all that property. And then little by little through the years, they fell out. People stopped paying. They got discouraged. And we started, we sold the woodlot. The group in the association sold the woodlot. And then there was just 7 of us left at the end. And we sold the 234 acres to a private party who really loved the Indians, and was born back east, but he had been around Indians for a long time, and he could afford to buy the property. And so he bought that, and then we sold that to him. And then we gave back to the tribe the water system, the cemetery, and the picnic area. So when Donald died, they just didn't ask me for anything.
They didn't?
No. And they didn't give me anything. You're just cut out. Even if tribal health, I never did get any dental or doctor work. I always had my own insurance. They don't take in outsiders. You have to come from a tribe and have a number, and I still see quite a few of the relatives. Donald he was the oldest. And the other ones are, 5, 6, and 7 years younger than him. See, and I knew all the cousins. But the cousins were younger than him, and he never ran with the cousins. So after we got married and moved back here, that's when the cousins and all of us started getting together. And now my girls know all the cousins' kids. And yeah, they're all grown up now. They're in their 60s, the kids are. And they're taking over. And
so you have 2 daughters?
Yes, I have 2 daughters.
And what are their names?
The oldest daughter is Kathleen Treppa, and the next daughter is Marshall Treppa.
And how old are they?
64 and 63 now.
Oh.
And we're buying a couple houses now. We have the casino. I think that's 7 years that we've had it now.
Which casino?
Upper Lake, Running Creek.
Okay.
That's our casino. And they're buying a couple houses and trying to spread to get other things for the economy. When Donald got ill, he did a lot of heavy equipment, backhoes, dump trucks, in and out, in the sewer lines. He did asphalt, which is really hard to do and stuff, all in Lake County. He was everywhere, and he had friends all over. And he always picked up, equipment. He thought he could do anything, and he thought I could do anything. If he needed a big tire hauled home from Sacramento, I could haul the tire home. Although I worked and had my own job. But I think he was building a motorcycle trailer and welding it and putting all the iron on it and everything. And he would pick it up and move it. and his disc went out in his back.
Oh no.
But one thing I haven't mentioned yet is we went 87,500 miles across the United States on a Goldwing.
What's a gold wing?
A motorcycle.
Oh.
It was wonderful. That's the last real thing we got to do, because when he got hurt, we had to sell this motorcycle.
Oh.
But we went to all of the states, most of the states, and went through, and sometimes just the two of us. We went to the Calgary Stampede by ourselves. Everybody was going to go, and then nobody went. That was our first trip. And sometimes we went with other couples. And then Donald was on the board at Tribal Health when it was first starting. His parents, what year was that? His parents had been working on a health clinic for years and years, and getting together with the other tribes, and they would meet up at Lakeside in one of those buildings, and they wanted to get a health thing going. And then when his parents passed, then he was elected to each tribe sends 2 people and an alternate. So he went up to the board, and he was on there when they built this place, and they picked out. And then his Aunt Milva was on the board with him. And, then I was a nursing home administrator for 32 years. When we came back up here in 65, I went to work in 66 for social services. And then in 69, I was hired to go over to the nursing home. And that's where my favorite bosses were, Guilfoyle and Bullard. They were so good to us. And the other one that owned it was Norrank. He was a principal down here. Bullard was a builder. He built the Moorman Church right there. And Guilfoyle had Meadows. He bought Meadows from the drugstore, and he ran Meadows for years. And then he sold to CVS. And first of all, being at social services, they treated the Indians terrible. Terrible. I would usually, if I saw an Indian coming, I'd go to the counter. I didn't like the way they treated them at all. And, like kind of discarded them. And so that's where I learned most of the people in the other tribes. Because they would, we have 7 tribes, but I didn't meet any Khois. So I only really met from 6 tribes through the years, because I'd go to the meetings with him and stuff. And so I just kept, listening to that stuff. So then I went to the nursing home. I was there for 25 years. They sold it, and the new people didn't like me no more. And so I was let go. And but I met quite a few Indians through the nursing home, too, that they came to stay there. And then I traveled for 7 years to other nursing homes around the state. And then Donald got hurt. And just as I was going to turn 62, so we had been home for quite a while. But we took Donald to, with Tribal Health, the kids and I, we took Donald to, Kathy didn't go, but Donnie Jr. and Shelley went. And we went to Washington, D.C., which was wonderful. We pushed him in that wheelchair and went to Canada, and he wanted to go to Hawaii. We went over to Hawaii, and he was a big man, 220 pounds, and he was 6 foot tall. And he was a wonderful hunter, deer hunter. And in Upper Lake, the Rod and Gun Club is a gas station now, but they had guns and everything. They always had a reward going for the biggest rack, the most pounds on your deer, and he won that several times. But at the time also people were spotlighting him in the orchards and stuff, and that was illegal to go get your deer and do that. But he hunted up on the hills and everything, and he worked for the Forest Service too. That's another one that I got help with. Like Grandpa and Donald, that was in '65, we took a bid on the Forest Service to take the backhoes and the dump truck up to Pillsbury and all the hills and work for them and put in gabions and roads along the water and everything. And I didn't know it was that bid, but they don't have to pay you. It's the government. So they can take a whole year to pay you. So we didn't have any money. So I went downtown to the butcher shop, to the bank, to Marion at the bank and the butcher shop, Santa's and them, and Peregrina, and the gas station, Story at the gas station, and I told them we had this contract, but we weren't going to get money for I think it was 4 months. And they all gave me charges.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, everybody was really good to me. And they just let us charge. And I learned that if you offer them a discount for payment, they'll get it back to you in 2 weeks. So from then on, we offered discounts. We billed once every 2 weeks or once a month and offered discounts to get our money coming in.
So when did Donald die?
He passed away in June 27th of 2020.
And I was told donations were made in Donald's name to build a Pomo statue in front of the Courthouse Museum. Whose idea was that?
That had been started by the Indians. They had wanted to make a statue, and they decided to make a family, a mother, a father, and a child. And they were going to have it made in bronze. And they were collecting funds for it. And the other tribes were all in it. The idea had started, and they had gone through voting on what the statue was going to look like, and had started their programs. And so Donald said that that's what he would like to have as a remembrance go to, was the statue. And that was Quillicut. Wanda Quillicut was working on that. There was a committee set up by the Lakeport Museum, and they were collecting for that, and the museum is holding, or the county, I guess, for the museum is holding the funds, but it takes a lot of funds, I guess, to get that going, so they haven't got it completed yet.
What are some of your best memories of Donald?
The other day I just found a certificate of achievement in his drawer where the United States Army thanked him in Korea, Seoul, Korea, for running a basketball camp when he was in Korea. And he always loved basketball. And he was a good player. And he was a very good equipment man. He always could run any piece of equipment. And he liked people. People liked him. And Donald was buried, he wanted to be buried by the service, so he's in the, what's it called, around the service circle, the circle there at Hartley. And so it was all decided that, I guess it's a thing they do, when I pass away, I am buried right there next to him. The Penn University in 1906 and 7, 1906 and 7, a gentleman came out here from the Penn University to Upper Lake, and in his stories, he said Upper Lake had 250 people and that the tribe had 250 people. And that was the Upper Lake. He went straight there. And he bought baskets. And he picked out all the beautiful baskets. And he paid good money for them in those days, $30, $40, $50, $60 a basket. And some people, waited for him to get there. And he was very surprised that the Indians could read and write and had beautiful English. He found that out. And he made friends with a lot. And then he wrote his history there when he went. And then he took the baskets back, and they're still at Penn University. And he met a couple of the weavers, and he also talked to a gentleman that was there that I have met and has passed now, but his name was Ralph Holder. And Mr. Holder told him about his mother, who the women got up in the morning, cooked breakfast, and went right away to basket making because they knew there was money in it. And they made baskets till the evening when they stopped and made dinner. And that's how the women's days went, every day making those baskets. And he picked out his favorites and bought them all. And his history is really, Penn University, is just really nice.
What are some of your greatest accomplishments?
I didn't realize that was on honey, I don't know. I ran a good nursing home and tried to keep that up. And I hear terrible things about them now. And we had 90 beds. And I ran it for 25 years. I was very proud of that because nursing homes have very bad reputations, and nobody likes you. The patient doesn't like you, the relatives don't like you, the staff doesn't like you. They figure they need more. I mean, nobody really cares for the concept of nursing homes. It's just not a happy idea that people have. Assisted living, ran assisted living too. Assisted living is better because you get your own room, but you can come down and you don't need nursing. But in the skilled nursing, we took people that really need qualified nursing, really heavy duty things.
What would you describe as the best day of your life?
Oh my goodness. Well, I loved the motorcycle and starting off to Calgary. For some reason, as a kid, I had an idea in my head that I was going to go across the United States on a motorcycle. And when I met Donald, I told him that, and a couple times through the years, I mentioned it, and then the people across the street in Upper Lake had a motorcycle, and so Donald went out and bought a little Allstate, and we rode around with them. And then we heard about people that were going to take these trips, and we went and bought a 84 and 87, an 84 motorcycle, Goldwing. They're the top of the line, like a Cadillac or a Corvette. They got everything on them. They talked to you, or they, this was a 90, well, when we took our first trip was in 88. And then we bought a new motorcycle for him in 90. He liked red. We got him a brand new red Goldwing. And so that's the one we took the most miles on.
What have I not asked you that you think is important for others to know?
I don't know. I have a lot of things to tell about little histories on the Indians that are fables, I guess, or things like, they're...
Oh, what's a fable? What's one you could tell?
Like Grandpa Frank always said that the Indians were to never look down at Blue Lakes. There was a white deer down there, and it didn't bring you good luck. So as you went around Blue Lakes, you were never supposed to look in Blue Lakes to see the white deer. But quite a few Indian girls have died in Blue Lakes.
Oh.
Through the years, crashing cars right into Blue Lakes. So I don't know if that has a... And then Donald always saw fires in the hillsides up there. And that was his grandfather speaking to him, always said, and a snake. He never liked to harm snakes. Believed the grandfathers were in the snakes. And Grandpa told about the Indian gold. And the Khoi, I see the Khoi seems to know about the Indian gold. I want to contact them sometime. And it's, as a little boy, he would go up behind Nice and Lucerne, and they would start fires, and it's called Meganite or something like that. I have to get the real name of it, because I forget that all the time. And you build fires in this rock, and the big pieces would pop out. And then they'd turn them for that. Here's like a, and then the shells came from Bodega Bay. See the big pieces there? That was called Indian gold. Hmm. Mm-hmm. And then all the shells came over from the coast. Bodega Bay, and there, there's another tribe over there, I forget what. And that's how they got all the shells, and that was their wealth in those days that they wore. So they just wore it not too often, but I think I wore it more because I wore it to when I got dressed up and to work and things so people could see it. Hmm. I like to show it and stuff. So, and then what else was there? Grandpa used to tell us some Indian names, and that's what they wanted me to tape so we could remember that. the Indian names and how to pronounce them, and Grandma's name was Cassie Kamen, and Buchika. Buchika was old man, and Donald was named. Now, if I forget it, oh damn, God. Kanushaba, and it meant lovely to look at, but don't touch. And I gave any nicknamed all. My father nicknamed all the kids Katie Bug for Kathleen, and he called my sister Billy Cook, and Shelley was the Rock or Shellyfish. Yeah, my father was a namer too, and Grandpa Treppa was a namer too. They got along. They would come have Thanksgiving dinner once in a while, but usually we went to 2 dinners. We'd come up here and go to 2.
Is there anything else you want to share?
I can't think of all this.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with us today and for sharing your stories.